friends, and welcome back to Studers. So, in the previous two sessions regarding the chapter life processes, we were discussing about the autotrophic as well as the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So, today here we'll be discussing about the respiration part. So, that's the second most important part in the chapter, that's the respiration. So, let's begin today's session. So the very first question I have to ask you, or I wanted to ask you, is why is respiration important, or what is actually respiration, or what is meant by respiration? What happens during respiration? We had already discussed about this point in the previous session only, where in the introduction part we were telling why is nutrition important, why are we taking food, then what happens during respiration and all. So if you have gone through those videos and your textbook, you'll definitely be able to answer this question. So I hope everyone got the answer. So, why is respiration important? Respiration is the process by which the digested food is broken down to release energy. So, respiration is the process by which the digested food is broken down to release energy. In the initial part of the chapter during the nutrition, we told that the ultimate aim of consuming in food or the nutrition is to acquire energy. And in the nutrition part, while discussing about the digestion, we told how the complex food what we take in is broken down into simpler molecules or simpler particles. Now, from those simpler particles, the process in which we gain energy is called as the respiration. So, in the further slides, we'll see how respiration is taking place, what are its type and importance, and etc. So here is a small picture which I got. So I found it interesting, so I just thought of sharing it with you also. So here you can see during photosynthesis, just try to recall the equation for photosynthesis where we got the end product as C6H12O6. That's the glucose. So during photosynthesis, what happens is they make the glucose, right? There the synthesis process is taking place. And what happens during respiration? They are breaking this glucose. So that's just two process being compared here, the photosynthesis and the respiration part. So yeah, so the we'll see what are the types of respiration. We mainly have two types of respiration, that is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So what is aerobic respiration? The type of respiration in the presence of oxygen is called as aerobic respiration, where the breakdown of the digested food is occurring with the help of oxygen, that is oxidation process is occurring. So try to recall your chemistry chapters where you have just learned about the oxidation part, the addition of oxygen or the reaction with the oxygen. Then next we have the anaerobic respiration. So this is the type of respiration in the absence of oxygen, or when there is a lack of oxygen, when oxygen is not present in the required amount, anaerobic respiration occurs. That is, breakdown of digested food is occurring in the absence of oxygen or when there is a lack of oxygen. I told you the two points in anaerobic respiration, that is two conditions. That's either when there is an absence of oxygen or when there is a lack of oxygen, because we'll be learning about the anaerobic respiration in both these situations. That is in the absence of oxygen and in the lack of oxygen. So we'll directly go to the aerobic respiration part. So um, yeah, let's take the example of photosynthesis itself. I In the first slide we saw that how glucose is synthesized, right? So just try to recall the formula for glucose. Yes, so formula is C6H12O6. So here we have 6 carbon in C6H12O6. So that's why it is called as a 6 carbon molecule. So here the first step starts where the glucose is broken down into a 3-carbon molecule that is called as the pyruvate. Pyruvate. So what's the formula for pyruvate? It's actually not there in the syllabus, but still I'll just tell you what is the formula for um, pyruvate, that is C3H4O3. So it is having 3 carbon C3. So that's why it's a 3 carbon molecule. So glucose, by the process of glycolysis, it is broken down into a 3 carbon molecule called as pyruvate. So what is glycolysis? It's a process where the 6 carbon molecule glucose is broken down into 3 carbon molecule pyruvate and a lot of energy is released. So what happens to the pyruvate? Now pyruvate, in the presence of oxygen, because it's an aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen. So pyruvate, in the presence of oxygen, gives carbon dioxide, water and energy. I'm sorry for the spelling here, it's actually water. So carbon dioxide, it's CO2. So glucose C6H12O6 is broken down into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon molecule in the cytoplasm. So we know the process here is glycolysis. The conversion, we know glucose to pyruvate, and where is it happening? It is happening in the cytoplasm. This it is called as the cellular respiration. So this very step of glycolysis or the cellular respiration is common for both aerobic as well as for anaerobic respiration. So this step, glucose to pyruvate conversion, you can see in both aerobic as well as in anaerobic respiration. So cellular respiration is the initial step or the common step for both aerobic as well as for anaerobic process. So where do this pyruvate to carbon dioxide conversion occurs? It occurs in the mitochondria. So mitochondria. So now we know aerobic respiration occurs in 2 steps. That's the first one is the glycolysis or the cellular respiration taking place in the cytoplasm. Next process is the actual aerobic respiration or the conversion of pyruvate into carbon dioxide in the presence of oxygen, which is occurring in the mitochondria. So in aerobic respiration there are 2 sites. First one is the cytoplasm and next one is the mitochondria. So here you just observe the number of carbon atom being told in each part. That is the first one we see here, it's 6 carbon molecule glucose, then into 3 carbon molecule pyruvate, and carbon dioxide, we know it's a single carbon molecule. So here what is happening, the number of carbon is reducing, right? So oxidation process is taking place. So complete oxidation is being achieved here. So then we'll go to anaerobic respiration. So I told that anaerobic respiration occurs in 2 circumstances. First one is in when there is a lack of oxygen and when there is an deficiency of, or when the oxygen amount is absent. Okay, so in the lack of oxygen, anaerobic respiration occurs in our muscle cells. So how is that? We'll see. As we already discussed, glycolysis is the first step where the cellular respiration occurs in the cytoplasm, where the 6 carbon molecule glucose is broken down into 3 carbon molecule pyruvate and energy is released. Then this pyruvate, in the lack of oxygen, it is converted into lactic acid and energy. So what is lactic acid? I'll just tell you the formula. It is C2H5OH. C2H5. So here we know that pyruvate is broken down to lactic acid. So formula for lactic acid is C3H6O3. C3H6O3. Again it is a 3 carbon molecule. Again it's a 3 carbon molecule. So here what happens is pyruvate is still a 3 carbon molecule and lactic acid again it is a 3 carbon molecule. So we know here the number of carbon atom is not being reduced or complete oxidation is not achieved here. So that's an important point you have to remember when we talk about the anaerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration, let's sum up that uh, glucose is broken down into pyruvate in the cytoplasm, and then when there is a lack of oxygen, the pyruvate is broken down into lactic acid, which is a 3-carbon molecule, and energy is released. So we know energy is stored in our body in the form of ATP. So that's ATP is called as the energy currency of the cell, right? Body, right? So we'll see about ATP more in the coming slides. So before that, when does this situation happens? When we do a lot of exercise, or when we do a lot of exercise, what happens is this anaerobic respiration occurs. That is, when we run very fastly, then at one point of time we start to breathe very fastly. So why is this happening? It is happening because our body is demanding for more oxygen. So when we need more oxygen, when there is a deficiency of oxygen being experienced, we start to breathe so fastly so that we get so much of oxygen in. So now what can we understand from this? That our body is experiencing a lack of oxygen. A condition is happening when there is a lack of oxygen. So at this time, yeah, we feel very tired also. And do you remember or can you relate to the situation where you have taken a lot of exercise, or you were playing so hardly and you got your muscle cramps, or you got pain in the muscle? So this is because of this lactic acid. So accumulation of lactic acid causes the muscle cramps. So when our muscle cells is in lack of oxygen, they will convert this pyruvate, whatever is produced at the end of cellular respiration, into lactic acid into lactic acid and energy. And this lactic acid, when it is produced in a larger amount in the muscle cell, it causes the muscle cramps. So next time when you get the muscle cramps, you have to definitely remember about this, the lactic acid being produced in the muscle cells. So now we'll go to the anaerobic respiration in yeast. So that's a condition where anaerobic or the respiration is occurring in the absence of oxygen. So again we know here the glucose is broken down into pyruvate, that is the cellular respiration, and then pyruvate or the 3-carbon molecule, in the absence of oxygen or when there is no oxygen present, it is broken down into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Just try to recall what is the formula for ethanol, or just try to guess if it's a, oh you, okay, I have written 2 carbon molecules, so you don't have a scope of guessing there how many carbons are there in ethanol, but still try to figure out the formula for ethanol. Okay, I hope you told the answer. Ethanol is C2H5OH. So it's a 2-carbon molecule. So again here what you can see, the 3-carbon molecule, it is just broken down into a 2-carbon molecule, that is the ethanol. That's the main product, right? So here again, incomplete oxidation is occurring. Then carbon dioxide is produced and along with energy. So in every step of anaerobic as well as aerobic respiration, we have seen that energy is produced as a product. So that's the main aim of respiration, that we get energy out of the digested food, right? Okay, so this might be a very familiar example for all of you. What's that? That's the fermentation. So have you ever observed the, for example, when a batter is being made in your home by your mom or someone, and when they use yeast, what happens to the batter? The batter will raise. Okay, so why is this happening? It is because of this anaerobic respiration, which is occurring there. So we are adding yeast to the food sample. Okay, sorry, the food whatever we are taking, whether it is for baking or for any other purpose. When we use yeast, what happens is we are providing them with a glucose or with a substrate to act. So here if we take the baking part, we add flour to it. So that particular maida or wheat is acting as a substrate, right? So there the yeast can easily break this substrate, and what happens? They will undertake anaerobic respiration. So at the end of anaerobic respiration, what we get? We get ethanol, we get carbon dioxide, and then energy is produced. So whatever this carbon dioxide is present, that's in the gaseous form, right? So this carbon dioxide, the accumulation of carbon dioxide will cause this. What is it? It's being raised. The volume is increasing. So that's the fermentation. Fermentation is an example of anaerobic respiration. So next time when someone bakes or your mom uses yeast, just try to observe the changes before and after the use of yeast, and then do tell them that it's an example of anaerobic respiration. Okay, so let's come to ATP. So I told about the energy being released. So energy released during the cellular respiration is used to synthesize ATP, because energy is stored in the form of ATP. So what's ATP? ATP is adenosine triphosphate. That's the full form, adenosine triphosphate. So how is this ATP formed? When adenosine diphosphate, where that is having just, okay, two phosphate, right? So adenosine diphosphate, when it combines with again one phosphate, we get ATP, adenosine triphosphate. uh, it's very it's given in the textbook also, where this respiration part comes. It comes in a box, so I thought you won't you might just ignore that box, so I just thought of putting that here. So okay, we'll see what ATP actually happens with ATP. The hydrolysis of one molecule of ATP yields energy equivalent to 30.5 kilojoule per mole. That's a very big amount of energy which is released from a single molecule of ATP. So that's why ATP is called as the energy currency, right? It yields a lot of energy. So what's hydrolysis? Okay, it's the reaction with the water, right? So when ATP is broken down using water, an energy equivalent to 30.5 kilojoule per mole is being produced. So this is just to indicate how much energy is being stored by a single ATP molecule. So this ATP can be used for various processes and various activities in the body. So that's about the ATP. So, we have learned about both aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration, its sites and its process. So, we'll just see what are the differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. It's a very common question that you can see in most of the question papers when you go through this particular part. So, differentiate between aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration. So the first step, aerobic respiration, occurs in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic occurs in the absence of oxygen. So what are the end products of aerobic and anaerobic respiration? So at the end of aerobic respiration, we got carbon dioxide and water and energy. So main end product will be carbon dioxide and water. And during anaerobic respiration, we got ethanol and carbon dioxide. So then in aerobic respiration, we saw it occurs in two main sites, that is in mitochondria and cytoplasm. That is cytoplasm. Cellular respiration occurs, and the next phase of aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria. Then in anaerobic respiration, it occurs only in cytoplasm. In mitochondria, it's not happening, right? It's only occurring in cytoplasm. Then in aerobic respiration, complete oxidation of glucose is occurring. That also we told how the oxidation part is taking place in both. And in anaerobic respiration, incomplete oxidation of glucose is occurring. And one more point I have to add here is, in aerobic respiration, comparatively more amount of energy is released, and in anaerobic respiration, a lesser amount of energy is released. So We told about the respiration that it can happen in the presence of oxygen, in the lack of oxygen, etc. So how is this oxygen, carbon dioxide, gaseous exchange occurring in in plants, aquatic animals, and terrestrial animals? We need to know about that too, right? So how is this gaseous exchange occurring in plants? So we already learned about photosynthesis in the nutrition part. So it's quite easy for us to know about the gaseous exchange in plants, right? So what happens during daytime? Just recall the formula for photosynthesis, that carbon dioxide and water is combining in the presence of sunlight using the chlorophyll pigment. It is then giving the glucose or C6H12O6. Then oxygen is also released. So that happens. So there also I told it's a photochemical reaction, or it occurs in the presence of sunlight. So during daytime, the photosynthesis occurs. So as a result of photosynthesis, the plants need energy, or the plants need carbon dioxide. They take in carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide is one of the main raw material for photosynthesis. So they take in carbon dioxide and they give out oxygen. And during night time, what happens? Sunlight is not there. So they can't undertake photosynthesis. So the only process what is taking place is respiration. So during respiration, what happens? They take in oxygen and they give out carbon dioxide. So that's the gaseous exchange happening in plants. That is, during daytime, they need plenty of carbon dioxide inside and they give out oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. And during nighttime, they will take in oxygen and they do not need carbon dioxide now inside. So what they do, they will just throw out those carbon dioxide out. So that's a gaseous exchange occurring in plants. What happens during daytime and what happens during nighttime. It's an important point. So just try to um, remember this, at least this picture. Okay. Then, then we have the aquatic animals, or for example, the fishes. So what happens in these fishes? Gaseous exchange in aquatic animals. So we know these fishes or the aquatic animals, they live inside the water. So they can't jump up to the top of the water level and just breathe in and just again go down. That doesn't happen, right? They just live inside the water only. So which is the source of oxygen there? It's the dissolved oxygen which is present in the water. So they take in oxygen dissolved in the water. Now, the rate of breathing is higher. Why is rate of breathing higher? We told one more situation where the rate of breathing is higher. That's about us, right? We told when we do a lot of exercise, or we have when we do a lot of exercise and when we feel very tired, we start to breathe so fastly. That is for more oxygen. So again here same thing is happening. The rate of breathing is higher in in aquatic animals compared to terrestrial animals because the amount of oxygen dissolved in the water is less. It's lesser. So that's why the rate of breathing is higher. They try to breathe very fastly so they get enough oxygen inside the body. So the path of oxygen. The dissolved oxygen, whatever is present in the water, how do they take in? They take in oxygen rich water. It's the same with us also. We are not just taking oxygen alone. We don't have that talent of just picking up oxygen from the atmosphere, right? What do? We just take in oxygen rich air. Okay, then we use that oxygen. Same here, same thing only happens here. The aquatic animals, they take in water which is rich in dissolved oxygen. So dissolved oxygen through water, through the mouth it is taking in, then into the gills, and then dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood there. So here I just shown the picture here. So the oxygen along with water along with the oxygen is taken in. Then in the gills what happens? The oxygen will diffuse into the blood vessels of the gills, and water which is with the carbon dioxide and other gases, it is being again thrown out. So that's a gaseous exchange in aquatic animals. Then gaseous exchange in terrestrial animals. They take in oxygen-rich air from the atmosphere through specialized respiratory organs. The terrestrial animals, we have the specialized respiratory organ, or we have separate organs just for respiration. I've shown the three diagrams here. The first one is of the amphibians, then the reptiles. Amphibians, for example, the frog. Reptiles, for example, the what are the reptiles? Example, you only try to remember, right? Sorry, recall. Then next one is the mammals. For example, we human being. Reptiles, for example, the snake. Okay. So amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. I just wanted to show you the picture. That's why I've kept these three. Then, so yeah. What are the features of respiratory organs? There are three main features which is being mentioned in the textbook also, that is they have a large surface area, then they have a thin permeable wall, and they are richly supplied with the blood vessels. Okay, so why do we need a large surface area? So that we get to take in enough oxygen rich air, right? Then that is thin permeable wall is present. Why is that present? So that it can it the when the inhalation and exhalation it is happening rapidly, our respiratory organ also should be able to cope up with that. So that's why. Then rich supply of blood vessels. So in the case of aquatic animals, we saw there the gills were acting. Okay. So what happened there? Their oxygen is being diffusing. The oxygen diffuses into the blood vessels present around the gills. So same thing happens here. The oxygen has to diffuse in and the carbon dioxide has to be thrown out of the body too. So we'll see in detail about that. So human respiratory system. So in human respiratory system, in this particular diagram, we have the so human respiratory system. So I'll just tell you the pathway how it is happening. External nostrils or just the nostrils. So the nose is there here, nostrils. Now from the nostrils into the nasal cavity. So into the nasal cavity. From the nasal cavity to the trachea, then the trachea to bronchi, then bronchi to bronchioles, and bronchioles to the alveoli. Okay, so now we'll see what are those. So nose, nostril, nasal cavity, then comes the trachea. So here trachea it's just the windpipe. So this trachea will divide into two. That is called as the bronchus or the bronchi. Now this bronchi, they will further divide into thin tube-like structure. You can see in this one, this particular picture here, the bronchi, which is just two in number, they again divide into small, thin tube-like structures further called as the bronchioles. And the end of the bronchioles, they have the small sac-like structures that is called as the alveoli or the alveolus. So uh, that's about the path. Now we'll see the specialities here. In the case of trachea, you can see here the ring-like structures, right? So these rings are called as the rings of cartilage. Now these rings of cartilage present will ensure that the trachea does not collapse when there is less air in it, or when there is less air passage during in the trachea. They do not collapse or they do not undergo any change in its structure. So that's why we have the rings of cartilage. Now, now in the picture only it is very clear that the alveoli and the bronchioles, that is this area. What do we call this? That's the lungs. So about the lungs, lungs is present in the thoracic cavity, and also they are spongy elastic bags consisting of bronchi and bronchioles and the alveoli. They are spongy. Why? Because this alveoli, right? They're sac-like structures and they are spongy. So that's why even our lungs is this bronchi, bronchioles, and the alveoli. They collectively make up our lungs. So then another important part is the diaphragm here. We'll see what happens with the diaphragm. It is the changes it undergoes during inhalation and exhalation process also. Again, there is a Okay, this is a much clearer picture of the alveoli. This sac-like structure is the alveoli. Now, just pay attention what actually happens. How is this gaseous exchange actually happening? When we take in the air which is rich in oxygen, this air may contain both oxygen as well as the carbon dioxide. So, our the red blood cell, what is one factor which is present in the red blood cell and which gives the red color to the blood? That's the hemoglobin. So this hemoglobin can be called as a respiratory pigment. Okay, they helps in the transport here. So what happens here is the oxygen which is present in the air which we take in, it will diffuse into the blood vessels. This alveoli, they are well supplied with blood vessels. This one is the blood vessels. So this oxygen will diffuse into the blood vessels where our RBC, which contains the hemoglobin, will carry this oxygen to several parts of the body. That's how our body gets oxygen. And what happens? There are various processes occurring, and there may be even carbon dioxide in various parts of our body. It has to be thrown out. That's how the exhalation occurs. Just try to recall, during inhalation we take in oxygen and during exhalation we throw out carbon dioxide. So from where is this carbon dioxide coming from? So this carbon dioxide, whatever is collected from the rest of the body parts, it is diffusing into the carbon dioxide. So this diffusion is a process where the particles will move from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, or it will travel from, um, mm, for example, here only you see here in the alveoli, during inhalation process, alveoli is having lot of oxygen, and whereas blood capillaries here, they are having lesser oxygen compared to alveoli. So what happens? The oxygen will move from a region of higher concentration where plenty of oxygen is present to a region of lower concentration where less amount of oxygen is present. So that's how diffusion occurs. So the carbon dioxide which is collected from rest part of the body parts, they come near the alveoli, and then now the alveoli is now this part, consider just this part. Here plenty of carbon dioxide is present compared to the alveolus. So what happens? Carbon dioxide will diffuse into the alveoli and then the carbon dioxide is thrown out of the body through exhalation process. So this is how the gaseous exchange is occurring inside our body. Next, breathing. Breathing, inhalation and exhalation. During inhalation, we take in oxygen rich air. During exhalation, we give out carbon dioxide rich air. So, during breathing, there are two main movements that is taking place. First one is regarding the ribs and next one is regarding the diaphragm. So, what happens to the ribs? When air flows in, when we inhale in air, ribs will move up and out so that there is sufficient space being created so that enough air goes in. At that time what happens is diaphragm also flattens. Now there is enough space being created for the air to occupy. Now when air flows out or when exhalation occurs, the diaphragm domes up or they will move up, and then what happens? Ribs will move down and in. So here you can see the size of the lungs is again it's being small. So here during exhalation the size reduces. So these two movements, the movement of ribs and the movement of the diaphragm during inhalation and exhalation, that is important. And one more term which has been discussed here is the residual volume. So what is residual volume? Residual volume is a volume of air which is present in our lungs even after the complete exhalation. So when we exhale out or when we throw out the air during exhalation, even then there is a definite amount or definite volume of air which is still present in the lungs. So that's called as the residual volume. So that was the end of the respiration part. So we'll just quickly go through the questions. So why do fishes breathe faster than terrestrial animals? We already discussed about this. Fishes breathe faster because there is a lesser amount of oxygen which is present in the water in the dissolved form than the terrestrial animals. We have a a better option of oxygen from the atmosphere, whereas for fishes, the amount of oxygen dissolved is less compared to test compared to the atmosphere. So that's why the aquatic animals, or generally the fishes, breathe faster. Then, why does trachea not collapse when it has less air in it? We told it's because of the presence of rings of cartilage. Rings of cartilage will prevent a collapse of trachea when there is less air in it. And then, differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. We saw the differences already, whether it is taking place in the presence or absence of oxygen, what are the end product, whether oxidation is occurring, it's complete or incomplete, and where and all it is occurring, what are the sites of aerobic and anaerobic respiration, what are the steps, etc., etc. Then, name the pigment which transport oxygen in the blood. So that's the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is generally termed as the respiratory pigment, which is present in the RBC, red blood cells of the red blood cell in the blood. So that's the pigment here is the hemoglobin. Next, label diagram of the respiratory system. So try to remember the diagram of the respiratory system, where you have to mark about the nostril, the nasal cavity, then the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, lungs, diaphragm, and even the larynx and pharynx. So that's about the respiratory system also. So this is some of the possible questions you might get, and even the equation for aerobic and aerobic respiration, fermentation part, then why is lactic acid, why are we getting muscle cramps due to the lactic acid accumulation, and yeah, those are the few possible questions we might face from this part of the chapter. So that was the end of the respiration part. In the coming sessions, we'll be discussing about the transportation. In the next session, we'll be discussing about the transportation, how it is happening. So thank you.